thought about what beauty is? Beauty is biology, and the human desire for beauty is genetically programmed. Beauty is a social currency that rewards the lucky beholder. Beauty is not one size fits all. Hi, I'm Dr. Monica Bonakdar. I'm an aesthetic medicine specialist practicing in Newport Beach, California. I'm the creator of Monbon Clinical Skincare and Amplify Filler Technique. You are listening to Beauty Heroes Podcast, where I chat candidly with trailblazing beauty leaders, examining, questioning, and challenging everything you thought you knew about beauty and the current beauty standards. My goal is to make beauty more inclusive and accessible to all aesthetically oriented men and women. All right, let's do this. Hello, everyone. Today we are speaking with Ario Koshbin, and he is the founder of Prolinium Medical Technologies. And I'm going to let him tell you about his company and his product line. But I have to say that this is one of my new finds this year in 2019, a new filler in the US market, and it's called Versa. And I absolutely love it. But Ario, welcome to the Beauty Hero podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for inviting me and having me. It's a wonderful opportunity. I really appreciate it.
So tell me about Prolinium and how you got started in this multi-billion-dollar aesthetic industry.
That sounds really sexy. Multi-billion-dollar. I mean, thank you again. And first of all, I just want to say you pronounced my name perfectly. So thank you for that. A lot of people really butcher it, and I guess it's because we're both Persian. So I appreciate that. But yeah, so I can tell you a little bit about how I got started and the industry and how I feel about the industry right now and the kind of general trend towards where I think we're going and where I want to be.
Well, that's fantastic. Our listeners really want to know all those facts.
Cool. Well, first of all, I mean, I just turned 40 this year, so I've been doing this for almost, it's been about 18 years. I started the company when I was 22, and I was in my last year of university. Kind of a weird serendipitous story. I got kind of lucky, and I was fortunate enough to have a lot of support from my parents, and my parents were really inspiring to me, and kind of, I've stood on their shoulders. So I've been incredibly lucky with my supporting cast and the people that have been there, and also with, I was lucky, very, very lucky and fortunate to have my business partner, Kasha, who was also my best friend from a very young age. He joined me very early on in the business.
Yes, that's a story all to itself, how you're working with your best childhood friend.
Yeah, we're kind of like yin and yang, so it's been very good. He's, I'm like the crazy one with the dumb ideas, and he's the one who's kind of like, hey, bro, take it easy with that. Or that's a good idea. So he's been a great sounding board. We've been very lucky to be working together, and, we have a great relationship. And we also have a wonderful team that we've built around us, and people that have kind of been helping and helping further the company. So I just want to put that out there. We've been incredibly fortunate. I'm not really the type of person that believes that, one person can do this on their own. And I think that 90% of it is circumstance, and there's a little bit of hard work, obviously, and motivation that goes into it, but you really need that supporting cast, the people around you that are going to support you. So when I first started, I was really lucky because my mom kind of was very entrepreneurial.
Yes.
She's been a very central figure in my life, a very strong woman. She kind of immigrated to Canada during the Iranian Revolution. Both my parents were lucky enough that they were able to immigrate, as landed immigrants. So they didn't leave as refugees, but time when they left was very difficult. So they came here kind of with, a little bit of money, but they had really left everything behind, the work ethic and everything that they had instilled. And I'd watched them, in my childhood working so hard to give me a better life. So I was about a year old when they came. So I was born in Iran. The revolution happened, and my family, we were kind of members of a religious minority in Iran. It's called the Baha'i Faith.
Yes.
So they were being persecuted at that time. So my parents were, they saw the writing on the wall and they wanted to leave. My dad had a huge family. Mom had a big family. My dad's family scattered all over the world, U.S., Europe, Australia, and same with my mom's.
Sounds like lots of nice vacations now with family.
Yeah, it's actually funny. Everywhere I go, there's someone that lives there. So it's good in that way. You never want to stay too long at someone's house, but it's been great. But yeah, so my mom's sisters were all in Toronto, and she kind of said, let's just go there. And we've been here ever since. So that's kind of how we got here. But my mom and dad were, obviously as immigrants, always working in different businesses. Eventually kind of settled in on, my mom had opened a small med spa.
Oh, wow.
And what
was her background?
Yeah. So she was an accountant, she studied accounting. And, but I guess, like so many immigrants that come to, Europe, North America, they have to reinvent themselves. So my parents were constantly, reinventing themselves and starting different businesses just because they wanted to, survive, I guess, and make ends meet. So my mom and dad had opened this small little med spa, and I remember I was in my last year, I was studying business, and I was looking for a job in a bank. And I remember I got an interview at a bank in Toronto called Royal Bank, and I went to the interview. I was just kind of talking about my ideas and the things I wanted to do with my life. At the end of the interview, and it was for a bank teller position, so it wasn't very glamorous at all. But I needed something. I was dying to get something because I needed some money.
A starter job.
Yeah, just get my foot in the door. And I remember at the end of the interview, she's like, the interviewer told me, I can't give you this job, and I was just kind of shocked, that well, she said, you're too ambitious. If I put you in this position, you're going to leave in 6 months.
She read you well.
I guess so. I was so incredibly disappointed that, I went home and I was just kind of sulking. Being, Persian, I'm an only child, and, my mom was just like, thinks the world of me, obviously. She's just kind of like, my hype person. She was hyping me up, but, you should come work for me. You could do this, you could do that. I decided to go and work there. And for 6 months, I was working, at my mom's little med spa, helping her with like marketing and putting together a website and just doing like the basic stuff of starting any business. And I really enjoyed doing it. But my mom and I were very similar personalities. So we just ended up butting heads a lot, and I kept trying to get her to do things the way I wanted to do them. And she, wanted to do things the way she wanted to do them. So after about 6 months, I decided, you know what, I want to go out and do my own business. Being in that environment, I soaked up all this information about kind of the aesthetic industry. And I really think it's such a great place to learn just at the grassroots level in a clinic, because you're seeing all of these products, coming through the door and different sales reps bringing things in. And you're also learning from patients and hearing what patients like too. So you're kind of a bridge between the commercial side and the patients. And I was learning so much just from seeing what treatments the patients were interested in. And I remember thinking like, I really want to get into this. Like, I think there's a huge opportunity here. And I remember at the time, it was kind of the beginnings of a lot of the laser stuff was going on. So laser hair removal, photo rejuvenation. And I said, I'm going to go start my own company and I want to sell lasers.
So at 22, you came to the conclusion that you're happier if you open up your own company.
Yeah, I've always been the type of person that I have a very difficult time listening to people.
I think it's called a born leader.
I have a hard time taking direction. I'm pretty stubborn in the way I think. And I guess in some ways that's good, in some ways that's bad. And I guess for being an entrepreneur, sometimes it could be a good thing because you don't really listen to naysayers. You kind of have your own ideas about what you want to do.
Sure.
And you're optimistic in a sense. But I think in general, entrepreneurs are optimistic people, and because you think things are possible, you think you can do things, and you have a certain sense of naivety where you think that you don't look at the bad things, you don't let things dissuade you. So I was pretty naive. I was 22, and I really I didn't know any better, I guess I could say. So then I think the older you get, you know, the more you kind of become jaded and life sets in. So it's harder to do things. But when you're
Of
young,
course.
you know, you don't look at the world in the same way you do when you're my age and you're 40. Like when you're 22, you think everything's possible and you can do whatever you want. So it was good timing in my life. And I was lucky because I didn't have any, you know, huge, you know, bills or mortgages or anything holding me down. I was pretty free to do what I wanted to do. So just went and I started this laser thing. And initially, my idea was that I was going to sell secondhand lasers. So, which was a horrible idea. Yeah, horrible idea. And, you know, again, in any business, you learn from your mistakes. So I don't regret any of the mistakes because they opened up, you know, opportunities and doors for me. So, I mean, you have to look at them that way. If you look at them, you know, as roadblocks, then I mean, it's very easy to kind of give up and stop what you're doing. But yeah, for me, it was an opening to get in. And I remember for the first 6 months, I literally sat at my desk and I would just cold call doctors' offices all around North America. And I was asking them, you know, what are you doing in your clinic? What type of equipment do you like? What do you use? I was just really learning about the business from them. I realized pretty quickly that a lot of people, nobody really wanted used equipment. So people didn't really care about that. And I said, you know, I'm going to look for some sort of a distributorship and try to pick up a line of something because that seemed to be what people were interested in, the physicians were interested in. So I remember there was a company out of California at the time. It was called VasorScope. I don't know if you remember them, but
yeah.
They had a couple cool devices. One of them was a Nd:YAG laser, and the other one was a KTP laser, which I think was kind of their best system. And I remember I emailed them and I said, you know, I have this company and I'd like to be your distributor in Canada. And the guy's like, perfect. You know, he emailed me back right away. He's like, perfect. You know, come and meet me. I'm at the airport in Toronto next week. Come and meet me. And I said, you know, this is an amazing opportunity. So, of course, I was 22 and I looked like a baby. So I called up this guy. I called up this older gentleman. There was a family friend that I knew that he looked a little bit more, you know, professional and put together. He's probably in his late 40s, early 50s. And I said, listen, can you just come with me to this meeting? Like, you don't have to say anything. I'll do all the talking. But just like come and sit there so I look a little bit more legitimate. And he's like, sure. So he actually came with me in a suit, you know, with a briefcase. And I remember I was dressed up and I met with the gentleman from VasorScope. His name was Brett Bakley. And I'll never forget his name because he really gave me my first kind of shot. So he came there and he's like, sure, you know, you guys can have the distribution rights and go for it. So I was so happy. And I remember at that time, I needed to buy a demo system to bring the equipment here. And again, that's when my parents really stepped in and they helped me buy a couple of units to demo, and they were using them in their
You had to buy your own demo systems. They didn't give
No, not back then. They made me buy them, which was, you know, imagine like, you know, it's 100,000 US 17 years ago for a kid that's just starting out. So, I mean, my mom and dad bought them. They helped me so much at the beginning, brought them in and they were using them. And when I needed to do demos, I'd take them out and do demos with them. And at that point, I had a first cousin that was very close to me that he was working somewhere. And I invited him to come and join me because now I finally had something to do. He came in for a few months, but he was mostly interested in other things. And I mean, he's a wonderful guy. He's like a brother to me. And now he's like, you know, just finished his PhD in sociology. He's more interested in teaching and learning. He's more of an academic. So after a few months, that didn't really work out. But then I called up Kasha and I said, Kasha, you know, I got this great laser line. You want to come and do it with me? And he quit his job. He was working in GIS at the time, which was
you corrupted him.
Yeah, I know. He would have had a wonderful 9-to-5 right now drawing maps, I guess. But so he came over and we went out. We really started selling these, and we sold enough of them that I remember thinking, this laser thing is great, but this business is tough. Like, you sell these machines, and the doctor's still got to get financing. He or she's got to go out and get, you know, $100,000 of the financing. Sometimes it falls through. So, I mean, I really wanted to transition away from it for that reason. I was really jealous of the filler reps because, you know, they were going in every month and they had, you know, this consumable that the doctors were ordering over and over again. They were kind of building these great relationships in the clinic, whereas we were going in and we were selling a laser and then we didn't see them again for 3 years. You know what I mean? And it's a much harder sell to sell a $100,000 piece of capital equipment versus, you know, a few $100 dermal filler. So I was like, you know, I want to get out of this. And I remember at the time I started looking around and I had come across a German professor. He had a technology that was a dermal filler technology at the time. And at the time in Canada, we only had Restylane, and Juvederm had just kind of started in 2003, 2004. And I went out and, you know, I flew to Germany, met with this guy, and we were able to kind of secure a global licensing deal on this technology. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about it because I think it's really fascinating how things come full circle. But we signed a deal with these guys, and their whole premise was that, you know, the more you cross-link it, the longer it's going to last, you know. It was a hyaluronic acid filler that was cross-linked about 1,000 times more than the product that we have now.
Wow.
So, you know, at the time, you got to kind of put this into context because this was when there was products in Europe and Canada that were made of all kinds of different materials. Like there was things that have fallen off the market because they were so dangerous. So we were kind of in a setting where it was the wild, wild west. You know, doctors were injecting silicone. They were buying things off label. They were desperate for product because there was a demand from patients.
Yeah.
We were kind of in that setting. We're thinking to ourselves, hey, longer lasting HA, that's amazing. You know, like this is fantastic. Like we want this product and I think we can really sell it. And of course, we didn't really understand biocompatibility back then. We just thought more cross-link, it's going to last longer. That's great.
The word that comes to my mind, Ario, is cement. But I never experienced that filler. So tell me what happened.
This is the interesting thing. And I mean, again, everything that happens in your life is a learning experience, you know, and I don't regret it at all. I think it was a fantastic learning experience for us. But when we first started, it was actually funny. The first filing I put in to Health Canada on this product was probably maybe 30 pages. And it was just this tiny little thing, very little safety information. Because back then, even the regulatory bodies didn't know a lot about this type of product. But what we started to learn from selling it was that, you know, we started seeing these terrible adverse reactions. Patients were getting the product and they were having swelling. But here's the weird thing. They were getting this delayed inflammatory reaction 4 to 6 weeks out, sometimes 6 months out, where you get the filler and then all of a sudden everything would be fine. And then you'd have some sort of a sickness like the flu or cold or something. And all of a sudden, every area where you had that filler would all of a sudden swell up like a balloon. We didn't know what it was. I remember at the time we were going around and the doctors were like, it was an infection. They were taking samples and sending it to the lab and we could see it wasn't an infection. And then, you know, we realized this is an allergy. So they were treating it with, you know, prednisone and steroids. That was the only way to kind of calm this down. And we started asking the question of why is this happening? And in 2005, so again, when I say this was a learning experience for us, the reason it was a learning experience is because we took what we saw with this product and we decided that we wanted to make a product that was the first aspect of it was going to be safety. We wanted a product that was going to, you know, go into the patient's skin and not give any problems for the doctor because we had been through hell with this one. So what we wanted to focus on was patient safety. And when we started doing that, that's when we started learning about cross-linking, biocompatibility, concentrations, all these factors in fillers that can lead to AEs in the skin, in the patient. So we actually started a research project at the time with the University of Toronto. There was a professor here that told us that, you know, she could help us. And so we started a program with them where we were kind of paying for them to do R&D into a new dermal filler for us. And this is back in 2006, I think, 2005, 2006. And we started, and I was so excited about this thing. And we were like, all the money we had, we were dumping it into this. Everything we had saved, we were putting it into this project, and crossing our fingers that we were going to get something out of it that was great. So, about a year in, we realized, like, months were going by, and we realized that nothing's really happening, and we're not getting any information out of these guys. So I started to get a little bit suspicious, and I wanted to somehow audit the professor in the program. And, I don't have any scientific background, so I wouldn't be the right person. Neither Kasha or I have any scientific background, so we wouldn't be able to go in on our own and do it. So at the time, I remember I had contact info for this scientist in the U.S., and I had called him up. He's a great guy. His name is Dale DeVore. He has a lot of history and, with Collagen Corp and a lot of other companies, just a great chemist. And he was tied up. He was busy. So he gave me the name for another gentleman that was in New Hampshire. His name was Dr. Stephen Kennedy. This guy was just leaving or just quit his job at another HA company. He was looking for consulting work. I remember we flew him to Toronto, and my first impression of him was like, man, this guy's so brash. Like, he was driving me crazy. I remember we went to lunch with him. He was just driving me absolutely nuts. Like, I didn't really like him. I didn't want to work with him, but he was the only person that was able to do it. So we hired him to go into the university lab and tell us what's going on. So he came in, and he spent about 2 days there at the university, and the professor was so annoyed with him that she kicked him out. And I guess she saw the same thing that I saw, so she kicked him out. But it's funny. It's funny when you first meet somebody, the first impression versus when you really get to know somebody. So Steve Kennedy came in, and he's like, look, guys, they're not doing anything at this place. You're wasting your money. But there's one amazing postdoc that's in the lab, and she doesn't like it there. And she really wants to leave. So my suggestion is that if you want to do something, you hire her and just get out of that place because they're wasting your money.
Wow.
So, again, the same thing I didn't like about Steve is because he was so brutally honest. Now became an asset, and after working with him for 5 years, I can truly say that he's one of the most unbelievable. First of all, he's the smartest person I've ever met. And he's just one of the most remarkable human beings that I've ever come across, and like, you never judge a book by its cover. After getting to know him, I was just like, wow, this guy is so honest, so smart, such a great person, and it was just because my first impression was this guy's so brutally honest, so tactless, like, says things like they are, doesn't sugarcoat anything.
Do you go by first impressions now?
No, not at all.
No.
I mean, like, what? My thinking has just completely changed. I mean, as you get life experience and you grow up, you realize that, people are never what they seem. And this guy was one of those cases where you get to know him and you realize that he's a treasure, a wonderful, wonderful guy. And, when I think about milestones in the company, I think about him, and I think about the contribution that he made. We would not be where we are without him. I think he's probably one of the biggest factors in the success of the company. So I mean, huge thank you to him. I've told him a million times, but if he's listening, if he's going to listen to this, I hope he hears it because he's just a wonderful guy. We're still friends, and he moved back. He retired a few years ago and moved back to New Hampshire to be with his family. Anyway, to go back, we ended up hiring the postdoc, and we hired him. And we said,
fantastic.
Yeah, I'm like, you know what, you guys, let me hire both you guys. And how hard could it possibly be to find a lab? Because, labs are everywhere. I was thinking to myself, because here I am being optimistic and thinking, I was like, you guys just hang out in the boardroom. At the time, we had this like really old house we were renting. We had about 8 staff. And I'm like, you guys hang out in the boardroom, and we're going to go find a lab. So we started calling around, and it's funny because there's one incubator in Toronto, and it's run by the University of Toronto, and it's called Mars. And this place is like 80% empty. And I remember calling them and saying, okay, guys, we're this startup. We're trying to do R&D on a dermal filler. We need a space. And they wouldn't call me back. They wouldn't get back to me. They would ignore me. And I realized later on it was because they were affiliated with the university, and the professor had pretty much told them, don't work with these guys. So they just completely iced us out. We didn't have a place to go. So we were just kind of month to month. I had Steve and Shadi on payroll, and I was kind of, looking for a lab, and we couldn't find one.
Don't tell me you made your own lab.
Well, it's actually a better story. And again, this is why I say it's so important to be lucky. And, people try to talk about, how they built things on their own and all this stuff. And luck and circumstance and good fortune has so much to do with it, being at the right place at the right time. So This was like in 2007. I was just calling around. One day I called this place. It's called the Markham Synergy Center. It's a small kind of city just north of Toronto. And they help businesses, with things and, getting set up. And the guy told me, there's this place at York University. It's a company. They have a lab there. And I'm pretty sure they'd be interested in renting you some space. I said, fantastic, and I called the guy up, and it was a company called FarmEng. We went there, and it was really funny because it was the university that I went to, and it was their old tennis area. So they had Tennis Canada had set up like this ghetto building with like 6 tennis courts that they used to run the Canadian Open at. And the building was now, these guys had turned it into one of the floors into a lab. We went there, and it was actually great. It was like a 2,000 square foot lab, fully decked out, and it had about 4 people working in it, scientists. And they gave us a tour, and the owner kind of pulled me aside at the end of the tour. And he's like, look, we're going bankrupt. If you're willing to take over the lease on this place and hire the staff, I'll give you all the equipment for pennies on the dollar. And I was just like looking at him. I was trying not to like explode of happiness.
How's your poker face?
Yeah, I held my poker face and I was like, yeah, sure, of course. So we ended up paying.
You got equipment.
Yeah, so we
got staff.
And we hired everybody in there. Yeah, we got staff. We ended up with wonderful staff, and the majority of them are still with us. We had a few scientists there that are amazing. One of them, Dr. Toshi Masui, he's still with us. Shadi, who's still with Shadi Moghadam. She had won like the top science prize in Iran and was doing her postdoc study at U of T when we met. All these people are still with us, for the past 10 years. And anyways, we ended up getting the lab full of equipment, full of scientists. We paid $30,000 for it, and it was probably over $500,000 of equipment. So when I say you got to be lucky, yeah, it was just such an unbelievable thing, And
when are you buying a lottery ticket, Ario? I want to come and buy a lottery ticket with you. Those are amazing odds.
It's such a journey, It's such a journey though, because this was 2000. So 2002 we had started, and now this is 2007. 2006, 2007, and so this was just the beginning of the financial crisis. The housing bubble had burst in the U.S., and these guys. This company had invested, they were a consulting company, they'd invested in manufacturing, and they weren't having luck in the manufacturing side. So, we just got lucky. So we took it over, and that's when we started the real work on dissecting every single product on the market and doing R&D. And again, we had our experience with the previous product that we were selling that was full of problems, and we wanted to know why. And we wanted to learn from that. So first thing we did was put these guys to work, and they started looking at the cross-linking on all the different products. And we realized the one that we were selling was 1,000 times, the leading product on the market at that time, which was like Juvederm Ultra Plus. I don't want to get too technical because I think a lot of listeners are going to get bored, but cross-linking is a very important factor because if you do it too much, you can run into a lot of problems. So the more you modify the gel, the less it looks like native HA, and you can have a lot of problems in terms of allergies, right? Because you're changing the biocompatibility of the product. And if you cross-link it too little, then it doesn't last long enough, right? So we wanted to know what that sweet spot was, and we did a lot of work to get to a point where we think, now we have the safest product on the market, in my opinion.
How long did that research take you?
That was about 3-4 years of R&D. And during that period, we invested in building the facility just north of Toronto. So by the time R&D was done, the facility was ready. And in 2010, 2011, we were manufacturing in Canada. the new formulation of the product, which we were incredibly excited about and happy about. But it was a 4-year journey. And during that time, what we did was we pretty much took every product that was on the market and we ripped it apart. We wanted to know what made each product good, what made each product bad. We took our own experiences from the past. But what was interesting was when you look at every single dermal filler that's on the market, what you see is, you have Restylane and kind of the Restylane family, the original Restylane, which is a very different technology. And then you had Corneal, which then became Inamed Allergan, which was Juvederm. And you had that product, which was kind of the father of everything else you see, because you had Juvederm and then people would leave the company and start up their own little companies, which were just renditions of Juvederm, really. I guess we were not fortunate enough to have somebody come over from a company to help us. So we had to start from scratch. And I think that's a blessing, because you don't make the mistakes people are making. You can learn from what they're doing, but you can also do things better because you're doing it from the start, from scratch.
So you didn't come up with a Me Too product, is what you're saying. You came up with a product.
Yeah, people say that. People say, all HAs are the same. I disagree. I think there's a lot of HAs that are the same, but and they're more similar than they are different, obviously. They're like cars, they get you from point A to point B. But, ask any car guy and they'll tell you there's very real differences between cars. I'm a car guy. And there's a difference between driving a Volvo versus a Ferrari. They still get you from point A to point B. But, so fillers are the same. There's nuances that make them different. As far as safety is concerned, that's our number one priority. And that's always been our number one priority. So when we did our pivotal study against Restylane for our FDA approval, if you look at the data, the thing that sticks out the most is that we had lower rates of AEs. We had less swelling.
Let's clarify what ADs are for our audience.
Sorry, adverse events. So
adverse
we had less
events,
complications with our product than with the comparator. And the other thing is, like, in 2 categories after 6 months, we had better results. In the improved and very much improved, we were scored better, statistically significant. So we were very happy with that. And it's funny, we just finished the study. The results aren't available yet, but it was in the lip, and we just had fantastic results against the comparator. Better results, less AEs. So, I think everything that we've wanted to do, we've been able to do. And again, that's because of the history of where we came from. We learned from our mistakes. And I think now we're realizing that the more biocompatible a product is, the longer it can potentially last. And the reason for that is, when you inject something that's more cross-linked or more modified, your body tends to try to attack it and break it down faster. Whereas if you can put something in there that's hiding in plain sight, it's going to last longer.
Wow.
It's going to give you a better result. So it's the opposite of what we used to think about cross-linking. We're now realizing that it's important to be biocompatible for longevity.
So we're in 2019, and how many products, Ario, do you have in your portfolio in Canada?
Well, in Canada and around the world, we have about 6 different products, and we just actually launched one that I'm incredibly excited about. It's called Revoness Shape, and it's our most viscous product that we have, and it's kind of the best product if you're doing. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about off-label stuff, but in Canada, they're using it a lot for sculpting. It doesn't absorb as much water, so it kind of stays a little bit sturdier in the skin. So it's good for areas of the face that you want, more structure.
You have products for thin parts of the skin of the face.
Yeah, so we have a whole portfolio in Canada, Europe, and globally, and we're slowly going to be bringing those out in the U.S. So right now we have obviously Revoness Versa and Versa Plus, which are, product that's a very versatile product that's approved in the United States for nasolabial folds, with and without lidocaine. And we just launched the product in 1.2 cc syringes to give doctors a little bit more product in the syringe. And then we just completed a clinical trial for our lip product in the U.S. that's going to be launched soon. And we're starting work on a clinical for our volumizer, which is going to be for mid-face volumizing, and we're doing that study against a comparator similar to Voluma or Restylane Lift.
So why is it so slow getting getting these yummy products that are available globally in the U.S.?
Well, that's a great question. And I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. You're in the United States, you're lucky enough to have a regulatory body that is kind of the most complete and stringent in the world in terms of what they want to see before they approve a product. And at the same time, because of that, it takes time. Whereas in other countries, we could, get a whole product family approved with, one clinical trial, for example. In the United States, it requires a unique clinical for each product. And so that takes time, and that takes a lot of money. Again, the way that I've always modeled and envisioned this company is we don't like to borrow money, and we don't like to take people's money. We like to use our own money and grow organically. I guess I'm a little bit old-fashioned in that way. So we're using our own revenue, and we invest 80% of our revenue back into R&D and into regulatory. So we're growing the company using our own profits.
Does it take about 2 years, would you say, for each product, each filler product that wants to come to the U.S.?
Yeah, I would say, from start to finish, you're looking at about 2 to 2.5 years. And, that's obviously from starting the study to finishing it, to doing the write-up, to doing all the other modules that the FDA wants to see in the PMA. So it takes time. And of course, that's if everything goes smoothly. There's always questions from the FDA in regards to different aspects of the product and safety and the trial. So there's a lot of work that goes into it. But again, I think that, the FDA is the most thorough and the most knowledgeable in the world from my experience.
Absolutely. And we're really lucky to have the FDA overlooking this whole industry.
Yeah. You've had a lot of protection. There's been a lot of products in Canada and in other markets that have been approved that have been disastrous.
Wow.
Those products have never made it into the U.S. because of the FDA. So you're lucky in that sense, So things get tested before they come to the U.S. market. So before we even got to the States, we had sold in over 80 countries, and we had a history of a product that we could show the FDA that it was safe and it was effective.
Did you mention 80 countries?
Yeah, so right now we sell in over 80 countries the products, and we really cut our teeth internationally before we started even selling in Canada. We were selling globally before Canada, and now I think obviously the U.S. is our biggest market, and Canada is our second biggest market. So
what are the aesthetic differences in the consumers that you have observed across countries?
It's funny, it's a great question. And I don't want to come across as sound offensive, but in a lot of countries that are more patriarchal or macho, the women tend to spend more money on this type of product than in other places. It was funny. I remember when we first started selling in the Middle East, like in places like Saudi Arabia and Iran, where women, cover their hair and the only thing you can see is their face, spend a lot more money.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, they spend a ton of money on, fillers. So it was far more acceptable socially to get cosmetic procedures done. Generally, when we started in North America, it was the population here in Canada is very conservative, and in the States, less conservative. I think Americans generally are a little bit more open, but Canadians definitely very conservative. So that was a big difference, for us. And I think also in Middle East, Russia, and some places like that, they want more product. They want big lips. They want everyone to know they got their lips done. Whereas in North America, they want subtle. They want, people to not know necessarily. They want to go to work, just look refreshed. So I think there's definitely differences in the way people want to be, looked at and how they perceive their own beauty. And we've noticed that as well.
It sounds kind of like the trends that I have noticed with makeup, where the makeup is applied so much heavier in the Middle Eastern countries. There's like a type of makeup called the Dubai makeup, where it's like just so much color and glitter. Yeah. Whereas here, we apply makeup to look like we don't have makeup on.
Exactly. It's more subtle. Yeah, 100%. Like I just was in Japan last week with my son. He's 13 and he's like obsessed with Japan. So I took him to Japan, and I was realizing, for example, Asian women, they don't use fillers the same way. They'll, for example, they put more in their chin and in their nose, for example, as opposed to their cheeks and lips. So it's different because of their facial structure as well. And generally, it's funny. When I go to big cities, like
Yes.
I've almost become oblivious to girls getting their lips done because like in Toronto, New York, LA, everybody has their lips done.
Yes.
And I remember you go to smaller cities and nobody has their lips done. It's one of those contagious trends. Like I think if your friend gets it done, then you want to get it done. So I was like in Raleigh, North Carolina, less than a year ago, and I remember getting there and thinking, "Wow, all these girls, nobody has their lips done." And I forgot what normal lips look like. You know what I mean?
Watch a 1970s movie.
Yeah, and it's so unbelievable how my perception of women's faces has changed just because I've become so used to it. And now when I go to places like I go to smaller cities, or even like when I was in Japan last week, I realized a lot of women there don't get their lips done. So it's just so different, so I think people's idea of beauty is different in different markets and places you go.
Yes. And what is your definition of beauty?
I think beautiful is, again, in the eyes of the beholder, but from what I've always wanted and what I've always wanted out of the product is I want for people to get their own self-confidence and to feel beautiful, regardless of what it is they're getting done. I think that that's the whole thing behind cosmetic procedures and surgery is if it's something that is holding you back and you feel uncomfortable about it or it's affecting your self-confidence, I think that's why it's here. I think it's here for you to feel, for the person themselves to feel confident and beautiful. I don't think it's necessarily about the way others view them. And it is sometimes, but mostly I think for a lot of people, it's about the way they view themselves. And it's about how their own confidence is affected by something. So, and again, how many of us have met someone that's been absolutely stunning and then started talking to them and realized that you don't really like them that much?
Yes.
So I think regardless of what we can do, about our faces, people tend to forget that so much of beauty also has to do with what's in someone's heart or their personality. So let's not forget that either. But definitely we want our product to be something that bolsters men and women's self-confidence and makes them feel better about themselves.
And do you think that self-confidence has a role in your success and happiness in life?
I do. I mean, I think in order for somebody to feel fulfilled, they need to feel like they're doing everything they can in terms of their work and their family, and they're being the best that they can be. I'll tell you an interesting story. This is the first time in my life that I realized what it was like to feel insecure about my face. Remember, I'd gone for a laser treatment and I had a huge burn in my forehead.
Oh.
And it was so bad that I started to realize that I couldn't talk to people. I was skipping out on meetings. I wasn't going out socially with my friends and family. I was wearing a hat. I was wearing sunglasses. It changed my personality. It's really unbelievable. Like, I didn't feel like myself. I felt like somebody completely different. I realized for the first time what it must feel like, because I've always been a very confident person my whole life. I've never looked at myself in the mirror and said, I want to change this or I want to change that. And for the first time in my life, I was like, oh my God, I want to change this. I don't like this. I don't feel like myself.
So obviously it was an unexpected adverse effect that you had.
But I think a lot of people, they have things like that bother them,
Yes.
And I can only imagine what it does to their confidence. And I feel like I couldn't have accomplished the things in my life that I've been able to accomplish if it wasn't for my, internal happiness and my confidence. So I think it's incredibly important for a person's own fulfillment. And we kind of overlook it, but there's a lot of studies that are coming out now about people in the workplace, cosmetic procedures, and how they're viewed by their coworkers and their bosses.
Yes.
And very simple things can change your, not only the way that you're perceived by others, but the way that you perceive yourself.
And that
so
belief in yourself.
Things are very important. Absolutely. It's, it's like the saying, sometimes the clothes make the man. And I mean, sometimes they don't, but a lot of times putting on a fresh, crisp Hugo Boss suit can add so much to your confidence as a man, or wearing a nice cologne or a nice watch, or just having a freshly pressed shirt. And I think those things also extend to our face and our hair and our hygiene, our grooming, and, fillers, Botox, or neuromodulators and devices, any of these things, to me, they're like hair dye, or they're like getting your hair cut. They extend our beauty. And I think it's just the trend for the future.
Well, they're lifestyle applications, and nobody will argue that designer pair of shoes isn't a coveted thing. Everyone wants to partake in luxury and lifestyle things.
100%. It gives you, it's something that makes you feel confident about yourself, right? I mean, again, we don't want to live in a society where we become so materialistic that we only view people by obviously what they're wearing or whatnot. But I think it's more than that. I think it's the way that people feel about themselves, Right. So I think you wouldn't blink an eye if someone said, "Oh, I need to get my hair done. I don't want to go out tonight because my roots are showing," or something. But that's really what is happening with fillers now. It's becoming as common as hair dye in a lot of cities. So a lot of women mainstream. Are adding it to their. It's become so mainstream, and I think that's going to be the trend for the future. Is these types of things are going to be as common as getting, your hair cut, or getting your hair dyed, or getting your, waxed, or whatever your beauty regimen is, or whatever is part of taking yourself to make you feel good. It's going to become part of that.
That's very interesting. On a different note, I would like to talk to you about how you're educating your injectors. You currently had an aesthetic summit in Canada, 3-4 days of intense education mixed in with a lot of fun that I had the privilege to attend. And the education that I received from many colleagues who were there lecturing was amazing. I have to say, in 20 years of being in this field, this is the most that anyone has done for physicians. I'm wondering what your view of education is and how you plan on preventing novices from getting your products and messing up faces.
That's an excellent question. I mean, for us, the patients that are walking around with our product in their face, that's our advertising. If you see someone with, they look refreshed and they look wonderful, you're going to say to them, "You look great. What did you do?"
Yeah.
That's the number one advertising for physicians or practitioners or any extenders or nurses or anybody that's doing this type of procedure. Your patients are your advertising, right? So how do we make sure that people are walking around looking great as opposed to walking around looking like pillows? I know you see a lot of these people that get fillers done, and they've got so much filler in their face that they almost look like they're, puffed up like a pillow. So a lot of people are calling them like pillow face or whatever, or duck lips. You see it all the time. I don't want to call out any competitors or anything, but I think a lot of companies, they're looking at selling more product. They want each patient to get more because they want to extend their bottom line. I look at it completely the opposite. I want patients to have good outcomes because that's going to be why other people will choose to do the procedure. So as opposed to getting one patient shoving 40 syringes in their face or 20 syringes or whatever, Mauricio De Maio is telling people to do in his courses, I prefer trainers that use less, that don't do a lot of, product. They just do optimal correction, as little as possible to get the desired outcome. That's what I want. And I think if we as companies can go around training doctors in that way, it's better for the whole industry. So one of the focal and central pieces of our policy is that we're going to use the best doctors, the doctors that we think have wonderful outcomes, and we're going to stage events, monthly to train our injectors so that they get patients leaving their clinics that other people want to look like, not that other people want to make fun of. And again, it's bad for the industry to shove someone, 20, 30 syringes in someone's face when they don't really need it, just because you want to sell product. So I think we need to be responsible as manufacturers and try to teach doctors to get the best outcomes with as little as product as necessary, as opposed to, pumping them full of air. So that's kind of what we've been trying to do.
Well, that's very refreshing to hear. It's been a pleasure, Ario, speaking with you. I'm trying to figure out more Persian or more Canadian. I'm not quite sure, but the hospitality at your aesthetic summit was perfectly Middle Eastern, and the red carpet was rolled out, and it was just so fun to
very
be.
Kind of you. It's such an honor to have you there, and I thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come, and it means a lot to me that you like the event. So. And I guess, you know what, that's one of the best things about Persian culture is the hospitality. There's a lot of bad things about it, but that's one of the good things. So, that's something that I appreciate. And I really appreciate you coming. It was wonderful to have you.
Well, if I hadn't attended, I wouldn't know the big news that I was holding back until the end of our talk. You're working on body fillers, and that's very exciting. Yeah. Specifically for the buttocks area, for buttocks augmentation without surgery and downtime.
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm always kind of thinking about what's next and what's the next frontier. Based on what we're seeing in the U.S., again, it's the same type of thing. There's a need and there's a demand for buttocks augmentation, but there's no real products out there.
Give us a year. When do you think we'll see that, Ario?
We are going to start, I think it's going to be 3 years minimum. Could be up to 5 years, but I think we're going to start the study in the next 6 months. We just got, the product finalized, which I think is amazing. And again, one of the things we're going to be doing in the next few years is we're going to be coming out with products that are combinations of hyaluronic acid with biostimulators like PLLA. So, for example, a product like Sculptra or Radiesse, they're great products. But the problem is with a lot of them that the carrier that they're in gets absorbed within a day or two. So in the case of Sculptra, it's in saline. So when you inject that, after a couple of days, the saline's completely gone, and all you're left with is the bead. So right after the treatment, the patients are really happy. And then a lot of times they'll leave and come back a couple of days later and like, I don't see any results. And with Radiesse, you have hydroxymethylcellulose, and that's another carrier that goes away really quickly. So what we're trying to do is we're bringing out a product that's HA with PLLA, which is a combination of a filler and a biostimulator. And I think with that, you get the best of both worlds. And our body product is going to be a combination of those two.
Well, I can't wait. And we shall continue speaking on our podcast as you have more products that you're introducing. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate your time.